Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners come to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth. With your hosts, financial and wealth-building experts, Christian Allen and Rod Zabriskie.
Welcome into today's episode of the Money Insights Podcast. I'm Christian Allen. I have got two guest hosts with me today while our good friend Rodney the Pod is out vacationing, camping with the fam. Not my style of vacation, by the way. But I want to introduce our guys. Everyone will know these guys. We've got Blake Brogan, Brenyn McConnell, both members of the Money Insights team who've been guests on the pod, 5 times? Something like that? You guys are regulars.
We are regulars.
I'm thinking of turning over the pod to you guys all together. So this is like a proving ground. You guys got to show you can like deliver the heat. That sound good?
Oh, absolutely. We're in.
Okay. Well, I am excited to have you guys on because the conversation we're going to talk about today, I think there's a unique perspective that you guys can bring, being in the trenches, working with people on a day-to-day basis, seeing both like what's happening in their current lives and what the future is holding. I think that'll give us a lot of context and insights into our conversation today, which, by the way, is the 10 most costly mistakes high-income earners make. I did a YouTube video a couple weeks ago, and it was the 3 most costly mistakes high-income earners make. But I found that I was like really struggling to get to just 3. It felt like there were a lot more, and that's kind of where this podcast was born. So that being the case, I think it's a really important one. We got to make sure that we avoid them. So 10 most costly mistakes and how to avoid them. The first one on our list is mismanaging leverage. Brenyn, tell us why that's the first one on our, and by the way, these aren't in any specific order, but just talk about why mismanaging leverage is a critical and costly mistake. And then we'll get into how we can avoid it.
Yeah, and I think what happens a lot is, mismanaging leverage, I feel like happens more often to the rookie investor, somebody who's, starting out early on in their journey. The hard thing is it can happen to seasoned investors. And so there's kind of a balance that you have to take and make sure that you find the right amount of leverage that you're willing to take on. Because what can happen is somebody starts investing, they're getting into these really great assets, they're producing great returns, and then they get a little overzealous and they start putting too much leverage into place. And if something happens in the economy, it might, anything happens that can affect those returns coming in from those investments. And all of a sudden you're in a position where you're having to come out of pocket to keep your investments alive. And then the worst case scenario being, we've seen people that have actually lost assets because they were over leveraged and there was no way of getting out of it.
So again, the thing that comes to my mind is 2008. And then as I'm saying that, I'm realizing that we've been staring down the exact same barrel in like recent times. So 2008, where people are investing in real estate, it's going up faster than they can even like keep up with, right? So it's the second I have a free dollar, since that's so profitable, I just push it there. And of course, that's the danger in becoming over leveraged. You get enamored, excited about the returns, and it's completely understandable. And yet it's also very avoidable. So we saw that happen in 2008. It was a huge issue. A lot of people have done well since then. Real estate's crushed it over the last 10, 15 years. But we've also seen that more recently, right? Like we've seen it in people within our own community who end up too heavily invested in like multifamily syndications and maybe with overly invested in like one company, single deals. But again, it could be that they're just getting overly leveraged in that specific asset, even if they weren't over leveraged from like a, mathematical leverage standpoint. The reality is that people have ended. Okay. So from that alone, we should at least learn the lesson that leverage, while extremely powerful, is also can be really problematic. So a couple of things that we do. The first thing that we talk about all the time is conservative leverage. We believe that leverage is powerful, but it has to be used responsibly. So conservative leverage, what does that mean? Like, it's a little bit difficult to define in every situation because it can be a little bit different. We always say the situation's the boss. And I think that's true with leverage, but there's some like obvious things that you can look at. Like, I don't think at the stage, I'm not going to go get 90% leveraged in a property, even if I can, right? Like, even if I can, I think it makes sense to be more conservative than that. So anyway, if you do that, you never have to worry about this issue of getting over leverage. And we should also just really hit on the issue that you brought up, Brenyn, was that leverage, when I get over leverage, it doesn't necessarily just hurt my that single deal. Like, it can then have this escalating effect where it's like, boom, every property that I own is suddenly like, I can't keep up with it and I become underwater, right? If I can't make the payments on one property, like, chances are I might not be able to make them on some of the other properties. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So like, it's just this like effect that can become, again, really powerful or really problematic. So mistake number one is mismanaging leverage. Blake, talk about mistake number two and how that can help us avoid mistake number one.
So mistake number two is not carrying sufficient reserves. And as a regular listener to the pod, Christian, I know we should have made this number one for you. I know you said they're not in order.
I say it a lot. Like, it's like the cure-all. It's the cure-all. If you've got cash, like, it's just, life's a lot easier. I'm just saying, like, I like to carry a lot of, now I always say this doesn't mean I'm carrying cash in the bank necessarily, although some should be there, but I've got to carry cash that's liquid. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder, Blake.
Especially with people who are business owners, or if you're, even just running a household, right? You're going to have times where costs get higher, or, things happen where you're just going to need access to cash. As Brenyn was talking about, when you're investing in real estate deals, every once in a while, you might need to be putting more cash into that, things that you wouldn't necessarily need to deal with in the stock market. So especially for higher income earners, business owners, people who are investing in hard assets, having cash is vitally important. So where do you keep that cash? One of the strategies that we talk about all the time is the investment optimizer. I'll just talk about myself personally. I keep a lot of cash in these high cash value life insurance policies. So one of the strategies that I'll use, though, is when I look at that as my opportunity fund to go invest in deals, I'm not necessarily saying, hey, I can pull 100% of what's available to me to go put it into a deal, right? I might leave a little bit of money in there, that's equity in there that I could tap into for, whatever I need. So just using a little bit of buffer, not investing every dollar that we have, keeping some reserves. It's hard to say you can go wrong doing it that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And you brought up another good point, which I think is important. One of the reasons that we talk so much about the investment optimization as a whole, as kind of that foundational element, is because it can have so many purposes, right? So as an example, rather than just carrying all of the liquid money that I need or feel like should have in my bank account, I can carry emergency funds in my policy where I'm actually getting a return. That's not money I want to leverage and go and invest. To your point, it's money that's there specifically as my emergency fund, even though the policy also represents a significant element having to do with my opportunity fund, where I actually do go and invest things. So, okay, but I think the number one way to avoid mismanaging leverage is to carry enough money. If you do that, you just end up in an okay spot. Usually you can buy enough time to get to the point where investments are performing better. Or it gives you enough time to make adjustments in your life and what's happening, so that you can, make it through that without going over the top, right? Because again, the biggest issue is that leverage can take you down. It can, while it builds up powerfully, it also, when it goes over the top, it can go really, really bad, right? You're suddenly going from wealthy to broke. So, okay. Don't do that, by the way. Don't go from wealthy to broke. Okay, the next one that I want to hit on is something that we see all the time. It's talked about in the medical community ad nauseum, because I think it's a huge, huge issue. I understand why it happens, but Brenyn, kick us off and talk about mistake number 3, which is lifestyle creeping. In other words, it's when my income goes up, so does my lifestyle. Huge challenge for high income earners. Talk about it.
Yeah, and I think, especially with anyone that went to medical school or dental school, I think this will really resonate with those people, because they go for so long, 12 years after high school, of just living paycheck to paycheck. They're living off of loans. They've got these huge student loans. And, as they're starting a family, having kids, I think a lot of them have expressed that it's really difficult because you have your wife and or your spouse, you have your kids, you really want to provide for them in a really great way. And it's really difficult to do that while you're still in school. So now all of a sudden you get out of school, you start making, multiple six figures in your career as a physician or as a dentist. And a lot of people, not on purpose, on accident, they just start saying, hey, we lived for so long without, it's now time to live and get the lifestyle that we've always wanted. This is why I went to 12 years of school. And so I'm going to splurge for the next 5 or 10 years. The people that can be a little bit more disciplined, right? Because I am a big believer in making sure that you have the lifestyle you want and you're creating rewards for yourself. But I think the people that can be a little bit more disciplined in not letting that lifestyle creep higher and higher as the income goes higher, right? They're going to start out with, hey, we're going to live off of 100 grand while we're making 300 grand. And then, right, if they start making 500 grand, they're going to live off of 175 grand. Those are the people that really go from high income earners to high net worth families.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And can I just tell you, I absolutely feel for people who have spent 10, 15 years trying to develop a specialty. They know that income is coming, but it's like at that time when they're working 60, 70 hours and getting paid $60,000 and have a family, like I get it. And I also will say this, I don't think it's reasonable, to your point, to expect somebody to not have their lifestyle creep at all. So like, It's kind of a silly concept. Of course, your lifestyle is going to change if your income changes, right? But to your point, there's ways to make sure that it doesn't become a problem. And really the way to do that is just to have some sort of plan in place where you're saying, okay, I'm going to save, my goal is to save 20% of my income, or whatever that number is, right? If I'll at least do that, then I'll find myself my lifestyle can still creep. I can still go out to eat more. I can still, drive a nice car and still become very wealthy as a high income earner. What I can't do is become one of those people that doesn't have any money left over after my lifestyle, right? And unfortunately we see that, but I'll be honest, we don't see it that often. Most people that we meet with and talk to are really great at this. They want to invest, they want to save. But again, we're talking right now about the most costly mistakes. And without question, that's a massive costly mistake. Okay. Is there anything else that either of you want to say as in regards to kind of this lifestyle creep, what you guys see out there? Are we ready to move on?
I think the last thing that I'll say quickly is the people that I've spoken with that are clients, that kind of fell into that trap of they got out of school, all of a sudden they started making a lot of money and they just kind of went on a spending spree for 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. It's not that they're not creating wealth now, because they're doing a phenomenal job of creating wealth and they're in a position where they're investing and doing really well. Their sentiment is more, man, if I only would have been a little bit more disciplined 5 years ago, now I have compounding interest working for me in my deals. And I think that's probably the thing that we hear more often than not is, just I wish I would have been a little bit more disciplined 5 years ago, but now they're in a place where they're doing really well and investing in some really cool assets.
Love it. Okay. So that brings us to mistake number 4. And this is a big one. But I also will say this, it's a complex, difficult one. And that is neglecting tax optimization. So again, anyone who listens to me know I'm always preaching about how taxes are likely for a high income earner in particular, their largest lifetime expense, like without question, right? We think about how expensive our home is, and yet taxes are likely costing us way more than what we're paying there, right? So anything that we can do to bring money back into our world is obviously going to have a big impact, but it isn't as easy as just saying, hey, I want to be more tax optimized. So Blake, talk about some of your kind of what you're seeing out there. And we'll just see if we can come up with some like reasonable recommendations that people can use to get better at specifically, bringing more tax or optimizing their taxes and bringing more money back into their world.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't know if I'm an expert in this scenario, and I lean on other people, other groups that we work with for these type of tax strategies.
None of us are CPAs, Blake. I'm not asking you to do a tax return here, man. I'm just asking you to give us some ideas on what you're seeing in our world. Like, just give us your philosophy.
So I think one of the reasons a lot of higher income earners start moving to the alternative space, if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm just really not in this world, or I'm just dipping my toes in it, even though I'm 45, 50 years old, you're like a lot of the people that we meet with. Because one of the things that, they realize is, you just start defaulting to investing in the market. Well, you get to a point where your income is, hundreds of thousands or $1 million more than it was when you started. And now, Christian, to your point, tax optimization becomes vitally important, more important than a lot of other things that you can do. So that's where a lot of the alternatives become very attractive, from the appreciation, the depreciation, the cash flow. There's lots of various strategies depending on what assets you're investing in that can offset some losses on the passive side, or even on the active side, depending on what you're doing. So that's where I think that some of the strategies that we're doing, our clients are doing, are hugely important, is even more for the tax side than it is for necessarily just the rate of return that they're getting.
So I have two pieces of advice here. Number one, and this is extremely difficult, but you have to find a good CPA firm, right? You've got to have somebody. Now, I'll say this too, like, this isn't easy. We have struggled with this. Rod and I have bounced around. We are with one right now that we're excited about. We're working with Anderson Business Advisors. It's been working well, but it's not easy to find people who are proactive tax planners, right? Now, the good news is we can point you towards some. For example, David Perez is very much a proactive tax planner. He's going to be in our virtual summit. So if taxes is something you've been thinking about, he's specifically, I think, going to talk about how to save taxes by investing in short-term rentals. So there's some really incredible tax benefits that come with that. But my point is just, number one, you've got to find a good CPA. And number two, you just have to be cognizant and trying to do it, right? Like, I guess what I'm saying is sticking your head in the sand and just hoping that it comes back okay. Like, that will prove to be, a poor plan overall for a variety of reasons. So what do I do instead? I make an actual plan. I be intentional. And I at least do those two things. So that's what comes to my mind. Is there anything you guys are thinking about that's like, hey, if you want to be better tax optimized, here's what you ought to be doing?
I mean, I'm not a CPA, but speaking to, what our clients are doing, we see a ton of them using and participating in bonus depreciation, cost segregation, specifically in real estate deals, syndication deals. Those are huge. And then the other piece that I would add to that is, a lot of our clients have W-2 jobs. And when you have a W-2 job, that's going to be, you can't use bonus depreciation or cost segregation against a W-2 income. However, we have, a select few or a couple dozen clients is what I would probably estimate, that have gone out with their spouses. Their spouses have gotten what's called the real estate
professional designation. Yeah.
Real estate professional.
Yep.
So what that allows them to do is they can now use their passive losses, meaning the bonus depreciation and cost segregation, against the active W-2 income, which will bring down that tax bracket. So I think my favorite quote that I've heard about taxes is the tax code is basically just a book of loopholes, and we just have to figure out how to use it. And I want to get this straight. I'm all for paying some taxes, but I'm also a big believer in the more money that we can get out into the economy in the form of investments and creating businesses and creating jobs, that's going to be just as powerful as paying taxes.
Yeah, I love that. You brought up a really good. So the real estate professional designation is killer. If you can qualify or you can work with a spouse to qualify, and that's like as powerful as any tax thing that you could possibly do. I'm glad that you brought that up. But you also brought up another thing that kind of got me thinking. One of the other elements that we always recommend people do, whether they're and especially if they're a W-2, income earner is that they make their investments businesses so that they can take advantage of business deductions, business cost efficiency, business tax efficiency, which opens up a whole bunch of opportunities, to your point, that I don't have as a W-2 earner. So if I am that, make sure that I own my businesses and I own my investments and I treat them like a business. What does that mean? It means that they're, that I have them in the proper LLC or whatever it looks like, just to make sure that I'm putting things in a order in a way that I can actually create the tax benefits while still having my W-2 income come without any issues. So you can still do it. And that's one of those things that people like turn off. It's like, oh, I'm a W-2 income earner. There's no tax things for me. Like, there are less without question, but as you build wealth, you build businesses, even if your businesses are just your real estate deals, right? But those give you an opportunity above and beyond, or aside from things like cost segregation and bonus depreciation. They'll give you some of the ability to just save like you would through any other business, right? So that's a good one. Okay, let's move on to mistake number 5. Mistake number 5 really builds into the other things that we've been talking about, and we've hit on it for a second, but it's over concentration in a singular investment. And this one's kind of obvious. Like, maybe this is just a costly mistake for anybody. It doesn't matter whether you have high income, low income, no income. At the end of the day, if you put all of your money in, all of your eggs in one basket, there's a reason that statement is what it is. It's just a bad idea. And obviously now I'm getting leveraged in a different way. I'm leveraging not necessarily I'm getting too much of a ratio of my money to the actual deal. Now I'm just leveraged in the sense that I'm over concentrated in one place, and it doesn't take a lot to now bring down the house. So that one investment has problems, and now my whole world has problems. That's obviously something we just have to avoid. And if I don't, well, it's going to be problematic. What do you guys think?
I think I've had quite a few clients in the last 3 or 4 years, maybe 2 or 3 years, that have experienced deals going south or not going well, right? And whether that means a lower return, it usually means they're potentially losing the capital that they put into the deal.
And that, by the way, is no small thing. That is no small thing. That's a massive deal, right? You don't want to go in losing money. Like, the worst thing you can do is lose money, right? And yet that is part of what we take on when we move into like some of the traditional split. We have less liquidity, and well, if I get over leveraged, I end up in that problem. But that's not an issue that we run into in like mutual funds. So I have to understand the difference between those and just make sure that I'm still utilizing the powerful tools that are there, but I'm just being smart about it. And, sorry, I kind of cut you off, Brenyn, but.
No, that's great. And that's what I was leading into is I feel like anybody that has a deal that goes south or has experienced that, anybody is not going to love that experience. That's obviously a really terrible experience to go through. Nobody likes going through it. But the people that are less hurtful or, less, what's the
emotional, less.
It's actually, it's less, they're less hurt by the deal going south, right?
Oh, so, you're just saying that the fact is they're not over concentrated in it. So while it has it's a pain point, it's not nearly as big of a deal as if I were really highly concentrated in that asset.
Exactly. If you have one deal out of the 15 deals that you have go south, you're going to be way less hurt by one deal going south than if you're seeing 10 deals of your 15 deals go south. And so that's what we've seen is people that have been over concentrated in singular deals. It's been, really tough. It sucks. And it's going to suck for the person that isn't over concentrated, but it's going to suck a lot less.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And we're using single investment here, but I think we could broaden that to say any singular investment class too, right? So it's not just that, hey, I put all my eggs in this one real estate deal. If I have all of my eggs inside, but it's all cryptocurrency, it's all multifamily, like any of those are potentially problematic. So to your point, don't get over concentrated in either of those areas.
I think even too in the real estate market, you can expand to different markets as well. So you can invest in different types of asset classes, but even then spread, if you're in more heavy towards one asset class, spreading it across different markets is another way to diversify. Even if you're like, hey, I really like multifamily or car washes or, self-storage or whatever it is, getting those spaced out across the country can be a good strategy as well.
Yeah. And to your point, Brenyn, like, so a lot of people invested in these ATM deals recently, right? I invested in the ATM deal and have actually and it's in trouble, just blatantly. It looks like it's in trouble. They stopped making payments. And it'll be interesting to find out, to see whether that we can get them to continue, whether there's the assets in there to actually pay people out. But I just want to echo your point, Brenyn, on that. It doesn't have the same pain that it would have if it was like a big chunk of my money, right? And also say this, that by investing in alternative assets, especially over these last 10 or 15 years, I'm still way ahead, despite having some bumps in the road. I'm way ahead where I would have been, and way ahead where I would have been had I just said, hey, I'm going to, push money into the market, into my 401k or whatever. Okay. So that brings us into our next mistake. And that is relying solely or even just too much on traditional retirement accounts. Why in the world is that such an issue, Blake?
Well, this is one that I kind of got my career in the financial services business started on, which is, meeting with people who are nearing retirement or getting to that age where they're either in retirement or they're starting to think now about the climbing down the mountain, right? How am I going to turn my assets into cash flow? And the thing that hit me over and over and over again is the traditional retirement accounts, while they look good going up, they don't do a great job of replacing a $500,000 a year income, right? Or $300,000.
It's super inefficient. It's super inefficient to try to do it that way.
For
it's
sure.
Crazy.
So while I'm not necessarily against traditional retirement accounts, I put a little bit of money into them. Really, you got to be thinking more from the standpoint of what type of cash flow is this going to create for me down the road? And that's really, I think, of what retirement planning should be, is more just future cash flow planning. The idea of retirement is I want to be taken out of service and have my assets produce the income, for me that I was accustomed to while I was working. Well, so really all we're looking for is cash flow, right? So while traditional retirement accounts can play a piece of that, if you get over, if you're relying on just looking at that number building up, I would encourage you to then, flip the conversation, say, okay, even if I get a couple $1,000,000, what is that really going to do for me if I'm hoping to have a 20, 30 year retirement?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So you're like, okay, when you're planning for retirement, it might make sense to start with the end in mind and start to look at I've had the same experience. In the industry, that's a big thing. Like when you're early on, it's like, hey, go meet with retirees, people like that. So like we dip our toe in this world, and I can just tell you from my experience, spending a few years really focusing on how to help people do things like maximize Social Security. This is 15, 20 years ago, but maximizing Social Security, trying to create really defined income strategies based on the limited, assets that are available there. But to your point, the biggest issue comes on the back end when there is not a good philosophy. So like there's really not a great solution if your plan has been build up everything in my IRAs, 401ks, et cetera. Now that's going to be my income source. If that's it, you're going to get there and you're just going to be frustrated. I've seen it hundreds of times. Like that's just the way it always works, right? So what needs to happen then is I got to start at the beginning. I got to start with the end in mind, but at the beginning, I've got to be more thoughtful about where I'm putting my money. And we won't get into all of the tax elements of it, because this could be, we say retirement accounts. It could be 401k. It could be a deferred comp plan. It could be a Roth. All of those things. Now we are a lot more pro Roth than anything else. And I think that's just because of the logical argument that taxes are almost definitely going up over time rather than down. Like there's no way for us to like get back into a strong financial position other than taxing people at a higher level. So, and that's constant battle. So, but it's a totally different question. But it's one I need to be thinking about. when I get to that space, how much of my money is going to be taxable? Is there money that's not going to be taxable? And what is the consequence of that all being taxable? Well, if I paid off my house, I have my kids gone, like suddenly I don't have the tax deductions from that. Like it suddenly becomes a really difficult proposition and a frustrating one when you're in business for the rest of your life with the government. They're the ones telling you how much money you can have and when. It just becomes really, really painful. It's easy to fix though. Just make sure that you do other things all along the way. Pretty simple, right? Okay, let's get into mistake number 7. This one's interesting, and I am absolutely guilty of this early on in my career. But mistake number 7 is ignoring the estate planning element of our financial lives, right? There's different phases that we go through, and it can be really hard to get our head into that space, the estate planning space. Like, who wants to talk about, okay, how's things going to look when I die? Like, nobody likes that. If you're 30 years old, 40, 45, you're thinking that's 30, 40, 50 years away. Why do I really need to worry about that? I think we all know the answer. It's more an issue of just people doing it and just making the decision. And of course, we do see, actually, I have to give a quick example. So recently we had a tragic situation with one of our clients where they were actually killed in, not in an accident. They were actually murdered. Like this was a really horrifying situation that came up. But one of the challenges that we've had since that time is that he didn't have all of this stuff put together. Now, the good news is he was very financially prudent. He had life insurance. He was doing a lot of really good things. So his family's financially secure, except that they're having to take everything through probate. It's a really long, arduous, process that just, it really, like the last thing you want to do when you have had a spouse or some significant other pass away is suddenly have to worry about trying to fight to get your money, right? So anyway, make sure you do the estate planning stuff on the front end. Like I said, it's not easy, but it's just a matter of saying, I'm going to do it. Suck it up. That's my best advice. You guys have anything else you'd add to that?
I can add. I'll add a little bit.
All right. What do you got?
Well, I just feel like people when they're younger, and this isn't everybody, but I feel like there's quite a majority of people in their 30s, 40s, 50s. When I talk to them about estate planning, they will often say, hey, I'm not leaving anything to my kids. I'm spending every dollar I can. Like the day that I die, if I spend the last dollar, then I've lived my life exactly how I want to.
Yep, I love those.
What's funny is it typically happens around 60 and for sure by age 70. The primary purpose of somebody's estate planning is, we hear all the time, I need to maximize this for my children and my grandchildren. I want this as my legacy. I want them to remember me and think of me. I want to take care of as many, whether it's college funding or first time down payments, right?
You just want to have an impact.
You want to have an impact. And it's funny that it goes from, I'm going to spend every dollar that I can. And I know, Christian, you've been in the business for a long time. I know plenty of advisors who have been in the business for 30, 40 years. And they'll even tell me that, hey, 20 years ago, this guy was like, nope, I'm not leaving anything to the kids. And now they're literally taking as low of an income as they can in their retirement because they're so worried about leaving as much as they can to their kids. So my philosophy, being in my, still late 20s, coming into my 30s, my philosophy is get ready now as if I am going to want to leave a bunch of money to my kids. That's how I'm going to get ready. And if I get to the age of 60 or 70 and I'm like, nah, I'm spending every dollar I want, then great. I have a lot of money to spend on myself. But if I get to age 60 or 70 and I'm like, yeah, this is actually super important to me, I've already done the planning. I'm already there. I don't have to worry about it at that point.
That is a good point, because what a lot of people don't realize is it's more difficult to do estate planning the further I get into it. The earlier I start, the more effective and efficient the estate plan is, right?
And I think the last thing that I'll add to that too is do your estate planning when you are fully aware of what's happening. Don't let your kids come in when you're 80, 85 years old.
You're right.
And help you set up a trust, because that is when bad things happen with family and money. So just avoid that. Get the trust set up. know exactly what you're going to do to execute the things in your trust. And then that's it. You're not making changes in your 80s. It is what it is. How you set it up is how it's going to be distributed, and your kids are going to get what they're going to get, and there's no complaining.
I love it. No fights, no probate. We know what's happening, clean and concise. Everybody wins in that situation. So I totally agree. Okay, Blake, we're going to move into mistake number 8. And this is obviously one that we talk quite a bit about, but I look at this as like a true foundational element. And I believe it well, I guess I should say what it is first. Mistake number 8 is underutilizing high cash value life insurance. Well, obviously we're life insurance guys. We believe in the value, especially of high cash value life insurance. But man, I have looked at this in so many different layers, and it's just impossible for me, knowing what I know about how high cash value life insurance works, not to feel like it's far and away the best foundational thing that we can do for our overall financial strategy, right? Like we're getting tax optimization, we're getting protection from things. Like it's making sure that my plan continues even if I die. I've got the safety, I've got the liquidity. All of these things are happening just because I have. And so like from a foundational standpoint, there is no other asset. I get people's like concern with it at times, right? Like life insurance. Why is life insurance like your primary asset? Well, I don't know. Like I'm just telling you that the fact is it has all of these characteristics that make it that. So it just is because it's been created that way. If at some point life insurance isn't as effective and there's other things that are better, we'll happily move to that. But until that time, man, I'm going to tell people use high cash value life insurance as your foundation. It can create income. It can help you optimize investments. It can create protection. It can make sure that your plan's ongoing by providing a death benefit. It's just so unbelievably powerful. I'm going to keep hitting it from the rooftops. Blake, talk about why or maybe just what you're seeing and like how you feel about this mistake.
Well, you stole all my thunder because I was ready to go off on a rant on my favorite asset too.
I feel bad.
Like, come on, Christian, quit taking all my juice.
I didn't mean to. I meant to just bring it into you, and then I just kept going.
It is so true, though. I mean, when we explain these strategies and we're promoting them, obviously we can't. We're not hitting on every single benefit, or you just sound like you're just giving like the ultimate pitch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we focus on the single benefits. I just need to say that my belief in what we're doing and how these policies are going to help, families in the long term is way more powerful than I think we even come across in a lot of our kind of promotional content. To your point, with the safety, the liquidity, the tax advantages, the ability to tap into it in retirement and down years, the legacy that you're going to leave. I've seen my grandfather passed away, 5 years or so ago, and he was very successful dentist, made a very high income. He had assets all over the place. The first thing that everyone wanted a piece of was the life insurance, right? Because that just came and it soothed over so many issues he hadn't done a lot of planning, and just getting a big tax-free check that was easily divisible. It was the ultimate asset to solve so many different problems on that side. So that's even in the future. But there's a reason a good percentage of my income that I make each year, the first place it goes into life insurance. And it's not because I want to leave it and have it sit there forever, but it is the best foundational asset. I truly believe to my core, it is the best place for your money to go first before you go out and do other types of investments and things with it. Getting it through the policy is just, very important.
It's huge. Well, it's huge. And we're not even talking about the very practical money element. We're talking about these foundational elements. But when we get to, we always talk about, the investment optimizer, right? And the reality is that I get all of these foundational elements. Plus what we're saying is you also will generate a higher return doing the exact same investing. And that's kind of a crazy concept. I kind of think people just don't believe us sometimes. They're like, well, that sounds nice, but how could that be? The reality is if you do it just by moving the flow of your money, you can create a higher overall return. Meaning that when I look at my overall net worth 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road, it will absolutely be higher just by running it through. And then in addition to that, I have all of those ancillary things that, to be totally honest, a lot of them are used foundationally in other situations. So like, it's just such a powerful asset. I couldn't agree more. Brenyn, did we miss anything that you wanted to hit on?
No, you guys hit it all. Just to summarize everything, we're getting a 5 to 6% guaranteed return. My emergency reserve fund is sitting in my life insurance policy because I can get 5 to 6% guaranteed tax-free returns. I can optimize my investments by taking loans from my policy and investing it in alternative assets, creating wealth. I have death benefit protection for my family. I have asset protection from creditors. I have long-term care protection later in my life. And then I have estate planning purposes with a tax-free death benefit to help equalize my estate.
That's wild. I feel like you just like listed off, like it had to have been like 6-7 different things that it's doing. And again, it's not that it does all of those, like it does all of those things simultaneously. Like that's what's wild about it. Okay. People have heard us get fiery and excited about life insurance. We obviously, I like though that people get to hear us and know that we like genuinely believe it. We're all using it. We all funnel a bunch of money into high cash value life insurance. And it really is our foundational asset. So that's what we're going to keep helping people understand, because without question, they'll be better off. Okay. Mistake number 9 builds right into what we're talking about. But mistake number 9 is lack of asset protection. Maybe just talk about the why around asset protection. Blake, I'll let you. Actually, Brenyn, why don't you kick it off for us and talk about why this is an issue and maybe the results of, what happens. And then, Blake, you can jump in and talk about some ideas on how to avoid it.
Yeah, I'll kick us off. So, asset protection is obviously huge. When you spend, a decade, 2 decades building and creating wealth, and, something as I don't want to use the word silly, but something as simple as a car accident or a lawsuit, right? A kid was jumping on your tramp and got hurt, right? There's so many different little things that would just be such a terrible thing that could happen to your overall portfolio. And so it's extremely important to have asset protection. And I'll add to having maximum limits on things like your auto insurance and having a liability policy. Those are all super important things in asset protection, because if something does happen like that, I'm not saying that I don't want to help whatever family out that was wronged or that got hurt, but that insurance is there to take care of them, not your bank account, not your real estate, right? Not your life insurance. And so there's a lot of things that you can do just with your liability insurance and your auto insurance, in addition to working with an attorney to make sure that you have the LLCs properly set up and the structure and entities all set up so that, everything's as protected as we can get it.
Yep. I love it. I was listening to a YouTube video that Clint, I can't think what's Clint's last name. Clint Coons. Thanks. I was listening to a YouTube video from Clint Coons, and he told a story. It was interesting because it's a story that I felt like I had heard before. It was basically the same thing. And it was a story of a family where the daughter went to college. She ended up hitting somebody while she was there. And because that was registered to the parents, it wiped their savings out. And again, to your point, Brenyn, nobody's not empathetic and, wanting to support the person who got hurt or that situation. But it's also like, is there a way? And what we're saying is there is a better way. And there's a way to take care of that and make sure that you don't end up financially ruined because of it. So making sure that both of those are in line. Okay. Lack of asset protection is a big one. And finally, mistake number 10, making emotional investment decisions. This one brings everything full circle, because that's a lot of the reason that we become over leveraged, or we don't carry enough in cash, or we get over enamored in one specific, over concentrated one specific area. Generally what's happening is we're doing it because our emotions are behind it. And can I just tell you, it's very, very difficult to not make it's very difficult not to make emotional investment decisions, because we can't just turn off our emotions in any moment. So I think the question ends up being, well, how do I avoid it? What do I do to make sure that I'm not that person? And I have some ideas on this, but I'm going to let you guys give us a run. What do you guys think as far as helping people make sure that they don't make those bad investment decisions so that, you don't end up in a bad spot?
Yeah, if I can make a plug here, I've worked with one of our partners, Chris Larson at Next Level Income. They have an entire coaching program that I've been through now multiple times. And, he blueprints it out for you based upon your situation on, what you should be saving. He goes through basically our list of 10 things here. It's amazing how many of these things he's hitting on, and then, putting out a solid plan. So I feel like I'm doing a lot of this and in having a plan of here's we're going to systematically save, $50,000, $100,000 a year. We're going to put it into here. We're going to create these type of cash flows because our purpose with our money is doing X, Y, Z. He kind of maps it all out. So I would say, even just from personal experience, paying someone a couple $1,000 to kind of walk you through that process and make sure you're not making emotional investment decisions and kind of mapping out, what you should be doing and creating a plan for you can have huge impact.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Brenyn, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great thing because I think I even, I've gotten caught up in this exact trap where, I see friends or colleagues or family that have invested in something and it's gone really well. And, you get excited and they're excited for you and they're like, oh man, you've got to do this. And I even think that, once you invest in something and you start seeing distributions come, I think that's a really good feeling. And I feel like people are like, okay, well, it's
I like that.
Yeah, I'm going to dump everything into this. Right. And it's really hard to pull back from that and say, wait a minute, let me just take 2 seconds and think about this first, because at the end of the day, I think what is super important is becoming educated in, 5 or 6 different areas of investing, 5 or 6 different ways that are completely different, or at least, very different from one another. Whether that's, cryptocurrency, multifamily real estate, self-storage, it could be a debt fund, a bunch of different things. If you're becoming educated and become familiar with those things, then it becomes a lot less intimidating putting your money in 4 or 5 different places. I think what people find is they put money in something, they feel really good when they see the first distribution come, and they just feel comfortable with it. So they're just going to keep putting money in there instead of, hey, let's get a little bit uncomfortable and start educating ourselves and learning about different assets, and let's deploy money in all those different assets.
I totally agree. And
that was well said.
Point, as an individual, like personally, I've had this. Okay, so I want to get personal for a second from you guys. I realize that you guys are a little bit younger than me, so like a little bit earlier in your career, but you both make a great income. So let me ask this question. Do you guys have any examples? Let's go back. Do you have any examples of when you made an emotional investment decision and it just didn't go all that well? I've got a couple, but I want to see, you guys have anything that would be interesting to share?
I've got one.
Okay,
it's a fun story. And this was before I was making a bunch of money, but I had a bunch of friends that had invested in, it was an electric car company. This was 7 or 8 years ago. And they had a bunch of stock in this electric car company. And I think they bought it when it was like $7. And it went to like $70. And they're like, it's not done.
Like, this is crazy.
Yeah, they're like, it's going to 700. Like, it's so sick. We made so much money off of this. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to get in on this. So I literally downloaded a Robinhood app. I was like, I just got to find a stock trading.
Got to get in.
Yeah, I got to get in. And then I transferred $5,000 and I put $5,000 into it, which isn't a lot of money, but it was at the time for me.
Yeah.
And it ended up being that the electric car company was making all these false representations on how far it was actually coming. Like, so it went right back down to like $7 or $8 a share. And you
of course bought it at 70 now.
I bought it at 70. Yep. Because my friends were like, dude, it's going way higher.
Yeah. Those are hard because we do see those. You do see those winners. If you're following the Motley Fool, they're gonna tell you about all of the, 2,389% returns they've gotten on XYZ stock. So like, it is one of those things, and I totally get it. Well, thanks for sharing that. Anything that you got for us, Blake? You're just an ace.
Really.
Blake's like, I don't make bad investment decisions. I just like get it right every time. Look at you. Okay, well, I unfortunately have a couple up my sleeve, and I'll just talk about maybe one or two of them real quick. So the first one, people might have heard me talk about when I was younger. I invested in a piece of property that we planned to have yurts on. Do you guys know what yurts are?
Mm-hmm.
So anyone that doesn't know, it's like a glamping, like a glamour camping. It's this big, like usually it's like a circular, like luxury tent, more or less. And so I had a friend who owned some property in Zion's. He brought the property. I brought the money to fund the other stuff, including digging for a water well, which cost me like 25 grand to dig for this thing. And we came up empty. So I put out like, I don't know what it was. It wasn't a crazy amount, 50, 60 grand to building our property where we were going to have like a dozen yurts on it. And by the way, if we got that thing working, it was going to crush it. Like it was right by Zion's National Park. People do that all the time. I don't do that kind of thing, but people do. So anyway, it was a good idea. And yet I got too excited and I jumped the gun. Where I say the emotional part is I knew that water had to be there, but we took the risk, say we're going to move forward without knowing definitively that the water was there. We just kind of thought that we would get it. Well, we didn't get water and it blew up the whole investment and kaput. Okay, so that's my first one. The other two are maybe a little bit different. So one of them is when I bought the day spa. Now that was supposed to be an investment and it ended up being a job. So I bought myself a job that like I was shelling out like 10, 15, 20 grand a month to get the thing, like just in overhead costs and stuff to get it up and running. It turned out that was a bad investment. And I don't know what I was thinking at that point. I think at that point, I just wanted to like diversify the style of investments. And if I'm being totally honest, while Money Insights is like my core business and it always has been, I just was kind of like running on autopilot. And I kind of wanted to, dip my toe into various, different entrepreneurial ideas. Well, it's not always a good idea. That one was a disaster. And then the third one, and no one's going to listen to me anymore, is the recent ATM deal, right? I think to your point, Brenyn, I was like, hey, things look pretty good. We've got some extra cash here. We need something to put it in. We'll throw it in the ATM deal. Now, I'm not saying that may not be an example of an emotional investment. And like, I look back and I think, well, it felt solid. It wasn't even like on the front end, but the reality is, it's ended up being bad. So those are like the three kind of missteps I've had. But the good news is I've had so many more wins than I've had losses that when I look at it in totality, it's not even close. I'm thinking about back to mistake number one, over leveraging. Well, what I don't want people to think is, gosh, they're saying leverage is bad. We are absolutely not saying leverage is bad. Leverage is critical. And when I look at the things that I may have lost due to some of these other things, the good news is that over the last 10, 15 years, I've crushed it because of the leverage element in real estate, right? Especially. So, and really, it didn't take anybody, like you didn't have to be good at investing in real estate. As long as you put money out there over, from 2010 to 20, you were going to end up doing pretty well. And that's basically what happened. Okay. So I'm trying to think. Let me do a quick recap of our 10, and then we'll close up shop for today. Okay. So 10 most costly mistakes high income earners make. Number 1, mismanaging leverage. Number 2, not carrying sufficient reserves. Number 3, we don't want to let lifestyle creep take too much hold or we end up in a difficult situation. Number 4 is neglecting tax optimization. 5 is over concentration in a single investment. 6, relying solely on traditional retirement. Man, I feel like I don't want to do a recap like that, so we're going to just get rid of that. Okay, this has been fun, guys. I had a lot. Again, I just want to remind everybody, Invest with Benefits Conference on September 12th. Make sure you get your ticket. It's totally free. And we're talking about like some of the absolute best in the business. Make sure you're there. Aside from that, can I just say thanks, Brenyn, Blake. You guys are rock stars. I know that the stuff that you're bringing out is incredibly valuable and the people appreciate it. So thank you two for filling in for Rod. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. It was great.
Okay, thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights Podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, please visit moneyinsights.net. The views and opinions expressed on the Money Insights Podcast are not intended to be individual financial, tax, or legal advice. Always consult with the appropriate advisor before making financial decisions. And if you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This will help others find the show and learn wealth building strategies for themselves. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.